Bonjour, Son Excellence, Dr Ibrahim.
Bonjour.
Merci d'avoir accepté notre invitation pour ce
Merci,
programme.
merci à vous.
Okay. Donc, j'aimerais que vous vous présentiez à nos auditeurs et puis vous nous dites un peu ce que vous faites et ce que vous avez fait. Que...
D'accord. Alors, mon nom, c'est Ibrahim A, Mayaki, je suis du Niger. J'ai travaillé comme professeur au tout début de ma vie. Ensuite, j'ai travaillé dans le secteur de l'uranium, dans le secteur des mines. J'ai travaillé aussi en Amérique du Sud, dans le secteur de la planification. Et j'ai fait un peu de politique avant d'intégrer l'Union africaine comme responsable de l'Agence de développement de l'Union africaine que j'ai aidé à mettre en place de 2009 à 2022. Et maintenant, je suis à la retraite, mais je suis beaucoup pris par les questions de sécurité alimentaire. Et c'est pour ça que l'Union africaine m'a demandé d'être envoyé spécial pour les food systems, c'est-à-dire les systèmes alimentaires.
Okay. So we will switch in English because we are here at the symposium, third edition. So I would like to know, knowing that you have led the NEPAD, what lesson did you draw about Africa's capacity to self-finance development so far?
I think there are 4 issues that need to be flagged in order to understand the question of financing. The first one is that we have been very lazy when we have been relying on ODA. And the consequence of relying on ODA, especially in the 60s and part of the 70s, was that our public policies, the policies defined by the state, by the governments, were co-defined with donors. And this has had consequences in terms of laziness of mobilizing domestic resources. This is the first point. So our lack of capacity in mobilizing domestic resources comes mainly from that laziness inherited from our relationship with donors. I'm not saying that ODA didn't provide anything, but I'm saying that mentally it had that consequence. The second point is that if we take a country like mine, Niger, which is classified as a LDC, least developed country, if you do the calculus and you increase by just 1 point customs revenue, it's equal to what ODA was. Which means that if you increase by 5 points, you have a financing space which is much bigger. But in order to do that, you need sound governance systems and sound accountability. Point 3, if you look continentally at the sovereign wealth funds and our pension funds throughout the continent, South Africa, Kenya, Zambia, Egypt, etc., Morocco, the assets under management is roughly about $2 trillion. But they do not invest in Africa. And mind you, they say Africa is risky. So if our own pension funds, sovereign wealth funds say Africa is risky, I mean, who is going to invest? So we have a question there. So they invest in Australia, they invest in UK, they invest elsewhere because they think that the return on investments elsewhere are higher. But the question is, we now have rates of returns of investments which are higher than most of the regions of the world. So, and we have been de-risking projects, and we have been improving a lot in terms of doing business. So the mental shift is important. And my fourth point is the debt situation in which we are. Debt is not I mean, you look at the big countries like from France to Germany to the US, the debt ratios are extremely high, much more than ours. The thing is, when you get into the debt, you need to have productive investments. And that's where That's where we should go. Now, as a conclusion of these 4 points, it's important to mention the fact that taken in an isolation, each one of our countries cannot solve its financial issues. We need to think about it in a regional dimension, in a continental dimension, and have a control of our monetary policy. Once we do that, and technically it's not difficult, we know how to do it technically. The question is, how do we shift to the political determination to provide that dimension?
Correct. So moving forward, what specific reform can help the African Union assert resource sovereignty similar to the Asian economy like China, who build their independence?
Well, I think, first of all, we need an African Union Commission which can fund itself and not reliant on donors. You have several regional economic communities who have a levy on imports. An ECOWAS citizen, when he's an entrepreneur and imports goods, he makes 2 checks, one for the National Treasury and one for ECOWAS. And so it allows ECOWAS to have a budget which is not very different from the budget of the African Union Commission, finance-wise. So I think we have the mechanisms do exist, but we, then again, I insist on that, we need a mental shift. And that mental shift will fundamentally depend on the type of leadership we have. The founding fathers of the OAU did have the mentality which consisted in saying, if we want to liberate the whole continent, we should, each one of us, be part of the solution of the liberation and contribute. Do you know that Nigerian civil servants were paying every month a part of the salary so that ANC could liberate South Africa? So that thinking has to come back again. So for me, the reforms in terms of adjusting an institution, adjusting a process, all of these type of reforms are important. But the most important reform is the mental reform, so that we think as one continent, we fight against fragmentation, and we think about common position, and we think about solidarity, because integration is also about solidarity.
So moving forward, how do African leaders balance foreign investment with national ownership of resources?
Well, we have an instrument, all African countries have an instrument, which have codes of investment. If a code of investment protects your strategic interests, then you can have foreign direct investment subject to the norms of that code. So Africa is not against foreign direct investment. I mean, China has had a lot of foreign direct investment. Malaysia has had a lot. India is having foreign direct investment. But you need to control the context in which foreign direct investment comes in. And you control it through norms that allows you to maintain your strategic interest. If it is in agriculture, you need to be careful about not selling your land to anyone, so that if production occurs, that production doesn't feed your population, but goes to feed someone else. So when your strategic interest is reflected in your code of investment, you are secure that an FDI, a foreign direct investment, can benefit your population. And at the end of the day, the question you should ask is, does it benefit my population or not?
Correct. So to close, what political step can move Africa from dependency to global competitiveness?
Well, I think there are 3 points which, in my view, are important. If you look at global trade, our part of a global trade is less than 5%, because, and mainly consisting of exporting raw materials and so on, etc. So the best way that will bring our competitiveness is to have sound foundations for industrialization. And we will not reinvent the wheel. The sound foundation for industrialization, as it has happened in Asia, America, and Europe, will come from the agro-industry and the diversification of our economies, because we still have a lot of people living in rural areas. So that industrialization at the same time has to benefit from green technologies and has to benefit from science, because let us not forget, blockchain, artificial intelligence can help us really move quickly forward. But in this perimeter of thinking, the most important point is that these policies need to be defined from the bottom to the up. So a revision of the type of states that we have is important, so that it is opened to the citizens. So it's no longer bureaucrats in the center who must decide for everyone. We should move towards a co-production of public policies. So industrialization, this is what will allow us to create the 20 million jobs per year that we need in the next 20 years. It will help us grow through a learning curve of competitiveness, because we learn to be competitive as we industrialize. And thirdly, it will help us to increase our intra-Africa trade. And if we increase our intra-Africa trade, we'll be less dependent from the rest of the world.